Hello, you're listening to Let's Talk About with me, Nicky, and this month's theme is whether capitalism is killing creativity. Intro. In the 1980s, my best friend Lorraine and I used to play at being radio DJs. I had this portable cassette recorder about the size of a book, and the tape constantly used to jam. Bring out the pencil. You'll need to Google that if you don't understand what I just said. It had to be physically flipped over to record on the other side. There was a lot of manual labour going on in the 80s. We'd interview each other for hours. Nobody was listening to us apart from maybe our mums, but that wasn't the point. We did it because it was fun. That instinct that we have as kids to make something just because we enjoy it turns out to be pretty fragile in today's society. Systems that are built around creative work have become very good at wearing down that childlike instinct. And nobody's owning up to doing that because obviously they can't. Chapter 1. What gets measured? The Oxford Handbook of Creative Industries identifies a fundamental problem with how performance in creative work is assessed. Research overwhelmingly defaults to commercial metrics, revenue, audience size, and market share, because those are the indicators that are easiest to quantify. The result, as the handbook notes, is that researchers focused overwhelmingly on commercial performance to the detriment of non-profit creative sectors and non-commercial measures of artistic and societal impact. The tools we use to measure creative success were built for commerce. Everything else that doesn't fit into that frame or that neat little box becomes, by its very definition, unmeasurable, and what can't be measured tends over time to stop being funded, recognised, celebrated, or in some cases even made. And this is not some huge conspiracy. It's a structural consequence of operating creative industries within a capitalist framework. When the metric is commercial performance, commercial work wins. And by no means does that mean that work is better, but it is legible to the system doing the measuring. Independent work, niche work, work that builds communities around people who need them, work that is in many cases doing something much more important than anything with a marketing budget. It simply doesn't register. It's invisible. The metric was designed to never see it. Chapter 2. What awards actually do. So awards might seem like the answer to this, right? A way of recognising quality rather than just commercial performance. However, evidence suggests otherwise. A randomised field experiment published in Organisational Behaviour and Human Decision Process involving over 15,000 students across 14 school districts tested the impact of both announced and surprise symbolic awards on attendance. The results were the opposite of what researchers expected, and the opposite of what most people running the award programmes would predict. Surprise retrospective awards given to recognised past good behaviour actually decreased the behaviour that they were meant to enforce. Recipients attended school less often after receiving recognition than the students in the control group who received nothing at all. That mechanism is important because receiving an award signalled to the recipient that their behaviour was exceptional, that they exceeded the norm, and that they went beyond what was expected of them. That signal licensed them to reduce the effort going forward. The award doesn't always say, well done, keep going. Sometimes it just says, you've done enough already, and you're good enough already, so you don't need to do any better. A separate signalling effect was also identified. The mere introduction of an award for a behaviour implicitly communicates that behaviour is unusual, that it requires recognition precisely because it wasn't expected. So now, if we apply that to creative work, the implication is uncomfortable. When we give awards for independent podcasting, community radio, or grassroots filming, we are simultaneously telling people doing that work that what they're doing is exceptional rather than useful or good, and telling everyone else that it probably isn't worth doing it because there's no prospect of recognition. Only 2% of educators surveyed in the same study predicted that the awards would demotivate. The other 98% assumed recognition would improve behaviour. The gap between assumption and evidence is pretty significant, and it applies way beyond just schools. Chapter 3. The evidence in practice. In 2023, Blind Boy Boat Club, one of the most significant podcasters working today with over 1 million listeners a month, withdrew from the Irish Podcast Awards despite having 4 nominations. His reasoning was the judging criteria, he argued, wasn't rigorous. Podcasts were being assessed on short clips rather than full episodes. His point was that you cannot judge a long-form oral storytelling the way that you can judge a radio promo, and that the awards without critical rigour are not just meaningless, but actively disrespectful to the creators who work hard at their craft. He was given the Champion Award anyway. I mean, possibly because, as he noted, he called them out publicly, but this was not an isolated complaint. Speaking to the Irish Post in 2020, Blind Boy described why the podcast format matters to him. Working in television, he explains, meant that his creative vision was always diluted by the time it reached an audience. With podcasting, he said, every week he gets to put out exactly what he wants. The awards withdrawal and the creative philosophy are the same argument made in 2 different ways, and he's not alone in this observation. In his 2026 commencement address at St. Louis University, James Gunn, co-chairman and CEO of DC Studios, described working in television in almost identical terms, saying his creative vision was always diluted before it reached an audience. The structural problem he identified is visible much closer to home, though. The Scottish Podcast Awards launched without a commercial sponsor, but by the time the 2026 shortlist was announced, Spotify was on board, and a dedicated Spotify Listener's Choice category was built into the structures of the award. That commercial relationship was embedded into the awards before the first award had even been given. Meanwhile, the documentary categories included entries distributed via BBC Radio 4 and BBC Radio Scotland, giving those podcasts a reach and visibility that no indie creator with a limited budget, no budget, or no backing can ever compete with. The metric, again, was not designed to see the difference. Right, so my favourite podcast at the moment is called On the Sofa. It has 5 million listeners, as they've recently celebrated, and it's hosted by 3 actors best known for their roles in Coronation Street, who get together to talk about film, television, and their lives in general. In one episode, they ran through a list of show concepts that they'd discussed on their podcast in a feature called Commission Impossible, where they make up a show and try and get it commissioned. They've done celebrity dog training, a mini golf format, a property show built for unsellable houses, all of which had, they joked, subsequently appeared on television with no acknowledgement to them. I mean, they were laughing about it and joking, rightly so, but the segment ends up with the observation that they should not be surprised to see their ideas on screen because, as one of them puts it, the bastards steal everything. It's funny because it's true, and everyone in the industry knows it, even if nobody's talking about it. What makes it less funny, though, is who it happens to and what they can actually do when it happens. Every time an independent creator pitches an idea, enters a competition, or shares a concept with someone who has more institutional power, then they're handing over an opportunity. Because without a paper trail, there's no proof that the idea was ever theirs. And even with a paper trail, the realistic options for someone without resources, legal backing, are close to none. This has happened to people I know working across film, television, and audio, and it's also happened to me. The system does not just fail to recognise independent creators in documented and largely unchallenged ways, but it extracts from them. There is also the question of who gets to make creative work at all. The entry point to film and television and the audio industry runs through credits. To get a credit, you need to have worked. To have worked, you need a credit. That closed loop is absolutely not an accident. It's a mechanism by which the industry reproduces itself, keeping the doors shut to everyone who wasn't already on the inside. And it's hard, again, to get anybody to actually admit that on record. The alternative to navigating these systems is to bypass them entirely. In January 2026, filmmaker and content creator Markiplier released Iron Lung, a film he wrote, directed, produced and starred in, which he released in cinemas. With practically no marketing spend. It grossed over 50 million worldwide against a 4 million budget, reaching audiences entirely through his own social media presence and a community that he's built himself on YouTube. In May 2026, speaking at a panel at the Cannes Film Festival, he announced to the world that the film would exclusively debut on YouTube on May the 31st, which is a few days' time, describing the platform simply as home. He doesn't have a studio or a distributor, no traditional marketing infrastructure, and he has an audience of tens of millions, built over years by making things consistently, honestly, and that proved more powerful than any of these systems that we have in place. So the system didn't make his audience, it didn't fund it, recognise it, or have any hand in creating it. And now it's watching it happen and probably desperately trying to work out what to do about it. Conclusion. Back to that cassette player. Capitalism does not kill creativity in a single blow. It does something that's a lot harder to see. It builds systems of measurement, recognition and reward around commercial value. And over time, those systems shape what gets made, who keeps making it, and whose work is considered to even have counted at all in the grand scheme of things. James Gunn told graduates not to follow their dreams, but to find what they were good at and what contributes to society. Don't chase something, he said. Be it. That is not the logic of capitalism. It's the logic of the cassette player. That cassette recorder was the size of a book, and despite its many flaws, the fact that nobody was listening to us, it was still worth doing it. If the price of making it, however you measure that, is promoting things people don't need that will end up in landfills, or chasing awards that were never designed to see what you're doing, then I, for one, I opt out of that. I've always opted out of that, and that brings me a contentment and purpose much more than any reward or adulation ever can. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicky, and if you have enjoyed this episode, please share it. This has been Let's Talk About Whether Capitalism is Killing Creativity. Music and sound effects from Pixabay. See you next month.